All right, good morning, everyone. Evening. Interesting. All right, good evening, everyone. Let us kick off. I would like us to just pay attention, and then if I share your work, so just be on standby. If you're not online, um, well, you won't be here, and I'll just make the comments and we can move on. All right. So, quickly, this is obviously an envelope design, right? First thoughts on this, right? You can see that everything is perfectly aligned in its location, right? The only difference is because everything is perfectly aligned in its location, everything is now, okay, so this is it, right? Everything is perfectly aligned in its location, right? This would be perfect in the middle because you have used the middle alignment. Okay, if you wanted him to be on the left, right, you most likely should be using left alignment for your text. And then if you're going to use this shape, it will mean that it's going to be somewhere on the left, right? Just so you have the exact alignment. Because so for this, right, I would personally have suggested if you were going to do so for example, if you're going to do the center alignment, right, I think this will work, right? Just having it in the center, whether up or down, okay? Up or down, right? Now, personally, my suggestion would have been, okay, so obviously this would be center aligned as well. My suggestion would have been to remove this, right? So that it's simpler because we're now having two different elements and the necessity for the second element is not too important because you want it to be as simple as possible. So because it's an envelope design, you don't want to take up too much space. So you just want to make them as concise as possible and then, right? So we can do this. Okay, so I mean, it doesn't have to be like this, but I'm just saying, at least my personal suggestion would be to remove this element because there seems to be no, it doesn't seem to be necessary here. Someone's mic is on. Can you mute yourself? I think that's John. Okay, so all right, yeah, but overall looks pretty okay. Okay, and I mean, if you're going to do a left alignment for this, right? You're doing this to the left, obviously, and then align this to the left as well. And doing this under here. Personally, I would have loved it to be like this, right? For it to flush with the text, or you might also want to do like this, right? But I think it's better the other way. Okay, so yeah, you have your left alignment. If you wanted it to be on the right, you can do it on the right, but it will be better here because here there's another element that might be a little distraction. Of course, it's still going to be clear even if it was here on the right. Okay. I want to know if I'm recording this class. Okay, yes, I am. All right. So yeah, that's this, but this looks pretty okay. Okay. Next, letter-headed paper. Um, Two things. Now, the good thing about practicing is that many things that you would naturally maybe have missed out because of something or the other, but I want to go over some of these things quickly, right? For this text, because it's print related, right? You don't want your text to be light, right? If you are using something for print, you want your text to be maybe definitely not light because for print, the chances are that it will not show as clearly as possible. Also, for a letter-headed paper, you don't want to use capital letter, a font that has only all caps. Okay, so if this font doesn't have smaller case, you're going to have a problem because in terms of describing and for the purpose of an actual letter, you don't want to have only all caps. So you probably want to use another sans serif font, right? That works both. Another sans serif font that is clear enough. Okay, so let me see. Well, you figure out a different sans serif font that is clear enough. Okay, and you can see very clearly. Open Sans looks close enough.
Okay.
All right.
David, sorry, I just came in and I found you talking about assignment. I wanted to ask that is so you're saying that this one the altar light that I use, I can choose another font to add to it, or I should change everything.
Come again.
I use altar light as my logo, and that's my typography style for my whole brand. Are you saying that
Yes.
because it's all in cap, I should change I should have like another option that I can use as normal small letter and all of
Yes,
that?
yes. I'm saying that two things. Number one, I'm saying that you need to have another font that has a lowercase, because for any brand in the world, you cannot have all your text in uppercase, especially because you're going to communicate formally and informally, right? That's one. Number two, the fact that you use Ultralight as your logo font does not mean it has to be your brand typography.
Okay.
Do you understand? So even if you used Ultralight for your logo, it does not mean that's what you must use for your typography. You can have a different font for your primary font and a different other font for your secondary font as well.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So yeah. And then I think something is missing here. Contact details, email, phone number, those type of things. You want to look out for that as well. It's a letterheaded paper. All right. So that's it. Overall, it looks fine. And then, okay, so this is business card, front, and then back. Pretty decent. Okay. So, and this doesn't look centralized, and I don't know why. Yeah, that's as much. So yeah. Apart from that, yeah, this is pretty decent. And then, because I said, remember what I said about this would work, right? So instead of using alter light, just use alter, because when you print, you don't want your text to be too tiny. Now, this is because it's print related. Okay, it does not mean that it has to be bold every single time. If you're using it online, the resolution is never going to reduce lower than what you put. So, but for print, you want to ensure that when you send it out for print, whoever is printing it out, your text is going to be clear. Okay. All right. So brand logo, table of contents, description about the logo, colors, smoke and black, logo fonts, alter lights. Now you see this element here, right? Is clear, but you want to have space around it. This is too close to the edge, right? You can see there's a lot of space up to down, a lot of space up to down, and then it seems to be like on borderline on the edge. So you need to adjust this so you don't have that problem. Okay. Then okay. Same. Okay, so I really had difficult time adjusting my logo, name and lines, and at the same time beyond a certain point. Saying this because I would love to give more options as to how my logo could be positioned. For example, the envelope form, the logo will be placed on top left, but this can be shown here. Oh, okay, yeah. So this is not necessarily for every single form of placement that can exist. Do you get? This is majorly I mean, this application is majorly for social media in the sense that you have Square for like Instagram, and then landscape for Twitter and Facebook, and then portraits for stories, Insta stories. Do you get? Yeah. And then based on this, actually, I would suggest that this should be a little smaller as well, because typically if you have this as your placement, right, you want your logo to be smaller than G gets, instead of being this.
And you see, once I'm telling you that I try to make it smaller, like it will not require me to go and reduce the font and then start adjusting the lines again. Instead of like when I group it and try to reduce it, it won't go beyond a certain point. Do you understand?
Okay, so what you need to do is, hold on. Okay, so you can just you can adjust them individually. That's the easiest way to do this. All right.
Okay.
So, but then you have to maintain the scale. That's that will be the challenge here. Right, maintaining the scale as you reduce the size and the shape, two shapes.
And
Okay.
that can be done by pressing Alt, right?
Okay, so
Or
it actually
using the
works.
Shift key.
Yeah, so shift, sorry. No, even if you don't press shift, it will still work, right?
Okay.
So yeah, so now I
And
just,
David,
yeah.
another thing is those pink marks that come out and show you the spacing, the numbers. What
Yeah.
do you press exactly to give you that?
You don't press anything, it just works like that.
I see the pink lines though, but the one that gives you the extra numbers, like the positioning,
Oh no,
how the
that's if you're
space between
moving.
one.
That's if you're moving. So like for example, if I'm duplicating this,
Okay.
it shows. Can you see it?
Mm.
Yeah, so that's when that shows.
And you press Alt for that,
Yeah,
right?
Alt or Option or Mark, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So for this, I think I just tried to separate them and then hold them together. Now it's actually reducing. So
Okay.
yeah, so that can work. If that doesn't work, then you can just actually reduce the elements individually and try to maintain the scale. Okay.
Okay.
So about Abasi. Now, can you see what's happening here? We're having two different alignments here. So this is center aligned and this is left aligned. So in this case, you want to ensure that you have some synergy in the alignments because of another thing that you want to watch out for. So also in your form, now look at this, right?
Mm.
This, I mean, and these are not compulsory, they're just like extra things that you can actually add to ensure that your design looks top, right? If you see what's happening here, right? This line isn't getting to the edges, but this is getting to the edges. So it makes it look weird.
Okay.
So if you want to do that, you just
Okay.
make it uniform. If you want both of them to not touch the edge, keep both of them to not touch the edge. So
Okay.
it looks more uniform this way. And then if you want to work with this, right, keep the
Okay.
alignment similar. So for example, if you do this, right, you align this to the right and you align this to the left for the sake of this line. So you're trying to align everything to this line, right? So this can be an idea, all right? Just because you have these lines.
Okay.
Okay, your alignments work per section. Do you understand? So because this is aligned to the right and this is, it doesn't mean that this has to be aligned to the right. Do you understand? Because this is a different section entirely, this is a different section entirely, just because we've introduced these lines in between. Do you understand? If these lines were not here, right? If these lines were not here, then this would be perfect because they're both aligned to the right and are aligned to the right. And then this is the form that they're both occupying. Do you understand? But now that you introduce this line, obviously it feels like they're taking two different forms. Okay, so you align this to the, you can align this to the left, right, to make it look like this is the nexus of this document, and then
they're all going towards the line.
exactly. So yeah, and we're done. Another thing you also want to do when you have a brand logo, right? Your text on your design don't necessarily have to be the type of the font of your logo. Many times I suggest actually typically they should be different because without there can be a difficulty in terms of making your logo distinct with your brand. So for example, the brand that I use, if you notice, the logo wasn't the color, the text on the logo wasn't the primary font. Okay, so you just want there to be some difference and everything doesn't look like the exact same font all through, right? So here, I think I'm missing, okay, so I'm missing anything here. All right, so yeah, that's it.
Okay, so there's one more question. I'm so sorry. Okay, so if Alter Light was if I have like some set, like I have three different fonts as my main font for my brand.
Three fonts as your main fonts.
I mean, like three fonts that I would probably use in my brand. That's not allowed?
No, not that it's not allowed. You said 3 fonts as your main fonts. That was what confused me.
Yeah, yeah, that I could use any of the 3 fonts. It's not allowed. It's supposed to be just one.
Okay, no. I was just referring to the statement. So you want to have your primary, then your secondary, do you get? And then you can actually have like an extra one. So it's not that you cannot have 3. You can, but they cannot be 3 main. That's what I was just trying to.
Okay.
Do you get? So you have a primary font, then the
Okay.
secondary, and then you can have 2 secondary fonts actually. But the problem with that, the problem with having 3 is that it starts to become more difficult to differentiate when there are more than 2.
Mm.
Do you understand? It starts to become difficult to maintain a style that is consistent when they become more than 2. Especially because in typical designs, you will not use more than like many times when you're designing, you won't even use up to 3 fonts. Do you understand? So that's why typically it's safer to stick with 2, right? But it's not impossible to use 3. Okay.
Sorry, I have a question on this that you just said. So does that mean if you have if you have 2 fonts like Thelma Bassi said, so let's say for instance I have one Anton and I have the other Horizon, does that mean I can switch at any time when I want to design them, or I still have to maintain the same fonts for the design, for the logo?
Come again.
Okay, so let's say for instance she has the logo written Thelma Bassi. Let's say she used maybe a script, or no, let me say she used Anton.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if she has 2 fonts, I want to understand the question she asked. So if she has 2 fonts, for instance, let's say the other one is maybe Horizon or something. Does that mean she can use Horizon later if she wants to change the font of the logo? Is that what
You
she's
can't
asking?
change the font. You can't change the font of your logo. Your logo is consistent and should not change for any reason.
Okay.
Do you understand? Your logo
Okay.
font is not something you can change. Your logo is your logo, right? Your typography is basically an element that is assisting your brand. Okay, so number 1, the font you use on your logo is not necessarily your brand typography. And in many times it should not be.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
That font is just a font you use for your logo. It is not your brand typography.
Okay.
Do you get?
I get.
So yeah.
I get.
Yeah. All right. So let me move on to the next one really quickly. Okay. Yeah. So this is a social media design. Now the first thing that I'm seeing here that is a challenge is hierarchy, right? So learn fashion illustration with, right? I can see the hierarchy really nicely here, right? The only challenge is after this line going down, it feels like all this information, right, is competing in size with the other information that we have on top, which should not be, right? So and also the alignment, for example, everything is center aligned, but now, so let me explain it this way. Your text, right? Hold on. Your text, okay, how do I explain this? First, right? Okay, let me address the hierarchy first of all. So Thelma Bassi this is your logo, right? And it's also your name. So it makes sense for it to be this big. Okay. Now, but typically that's not how your logo should work, right? In the sense that
I didn't have to use my logo here at this point, right?
Yes, you didn't have to use your logo at this point, right? But of course, because it's also your name, it can also work, right? Now, the size of this, right? Remember when I described principles of design, your hierarchy, everything feels like important right now. So I would not see anything as most important.
Okay.
So you want to reduce, and if you go online, if you just go online, right, and go to any design, right, look at this, right? This is a template. You can see the size of the details like address, location compared to the size of the main body copy. It's usually considerably much smaller almost every single time. And there's a reason, right? Is the fact that everybody's eyes cannot focus on the same thing at the same time. Look at this. Very small, very big, right? It's literally the exact same thing every single time, right? Small, big, small. Okay, so if you have your details like this, it's going to be difficult to focus on what is most important. All right, so you want to reduce the size of this to ensure that it's not competing with the main information that you're trying to pass across. All right, and then bring this down. So another thing is the size of this. I would have suggested that this font size of this and font size of this should be the same. So this would be 50. Let's say this is 50, for example, right? This should also be 50, right? Okay. And then with Mabasi, so this is fine, right? But so like I said, okay, let me duplicate this. Okay. All right. So number one, make this, and then okay. So fashion illustration, learn fashion illustration, right? With Mabasi is the most important information right now. So make this just a little smaller so that people can see fashion illustration as the biggest thing here, right? Okay. And now, so your, okay. So like I said earlier, so that you are able to work with your adjustments, to work with your alignment easily, bring your text things, your text box towards the edge, so that when you want to align, you can align really easily. Okay. So this is the most important thing, learn fashion illustration with Mabasi, right? And then we have these details. Now, because this is really, there's almost nothing else that we want to put here. So it's better for you to centralize this. Okay. Right.
I was also thinking that this will make the design a little bit empty, like it looks like nothing is there.
Yeah, but it's better than, yeah. So apart from the fact that and it's because of the way it's arranged, right? Number one, typically in a design you want to have like a header, a subheader, and a body copy. Okay. But here what we have is just a kind of just a composition that is basically the header, and then we have this in body copy. Okay, so typically what you have is header, right? Learn fashion design with Mabasi, and then you have some minor details here from sewing to not so from sewing, from maybe more details about what you're going to learn before you have the information. But because this is all that you have, right? It just makes sense for it to be like that, except what you then want to do is okay, so let me just turn back to what I was doing before, right? So now we'll just regroup this, okay, and then centralize, align everything to the left. Okay, no, not to show. Okay.
You didn't do that.
And then on group. So, but I like the size of the icons, very, very nicely sized. And then there seems to be no difference between for more information, contact us at this. right? So you either want to make this bold, or,
Okay.
do you understand? So that there's you know, some nice contrasts and people can see what you're trying to point at.
Okay. Please, I'm so sorry. I have another question. I'm so sorry. I feel that I'm taking everybody's time. Please, this style that I added at the edges, this amoeba style feature that I added at the edges. If I'm doing anything that regards my brand, if because I put it as part of my brand and whatever identification, blah blah, does it have to appear in everything? Like, what if I wanted to make my background for this logo pink? Like, if I'm doing an advertisement on Instagram or Facebook, does it have to follow this exact format? Can I decide to switch something up that is not in that my brand identity, blah, blah, blah?
Well, yes, you can, right? You just need to be very, very, very careful. So typically, right? I mean, if you want to be strict about it, you shouldn't, because then you're not going to be uniform. The point of having a brand guideline is such that when people see something that looks like that any single place, they can identify it with you. When you don't have something that people can identify with every single time, it's difficult to stand you out, right? So that's the challenge. Okay, so that's the explanation as to why there's a brand guideline, why there's a, you know, it's like Coca-Cola now. You probably never see a Coca-Cola design that has green all over it, except maybe it's Christmas, or that has blue. Do you understand? Just because they want you to think Coca-Cola every single time you see red. Do you get? So that's the reason why you want to do things like that. I would advise you to stick to the colors on your brand guideline, right? Also have secondary colors that you can play with. In your design, you don't have to have only two colors as on your palette. You can have your primary colors and secondary colors. So if your primary colors are smoky and black, right? You can have secondary colors like dark brown, teal. You can have your secondary colors such that those are the secondary colors that you can apply with your other elements, or you get. So yeah, it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be that way every single time.
Okay.
All right, so let me move on. Yeah, so basically the exact same thing, the arrangement and the size of this. Same here for the Twitter post. All right, so this is another logo, denim for everybody. And all right, so this is very clear, denim for everybody, really smooth. I can see everything clearly, and it's very easy to see and understand. Now, okay, chair lady, right? So this font is Sacramento, right? And we're using the same Sacramento here. Now, my suggestion, I mean, it works actually, right? But like I said earlier, it's very much better for you to try to avoid using your logo fonts on your design, right? So that your logo can be differentiated as often as possible in your design, all right? I can easily see that this is not center aligned to the page. Okay, so now it is, right? As you can see, number one. Number two, because you see now as you introduce these elements, right, there seems to be some form of sectioning, all right? My advice is keep this on your left, right? My advice would be to keep this left aligned, okay? Because, well, it works this way. Actually, it works this way. It doesn't have to be, but it's just a suggestion that I think will work better, right? Okay, this seems to be in a position. Okay, so yeah, so my suggestion would be to align them to the left, right? Position left because they are different elements. Okay, and then you can do this, right? And I like the hierarchy of the text. So another thing will just be maybe to just have a little space here between the name the title, and then the details. Okay. I see that there are no icons here. Sometimes icons might not be necessary because it's obvious this is a phone number and it's obvious this is an email address. Okay. Making denim affordable, denim for everybody. Yeah, so this is really nice. I like this. It seems too far from the Instagram handle. So yeah, good. Making affordable denim available. Right. Yeah. So this is cool. Really nice. Well done. New arrivals. So premium fabrics. First of all, first contact is, why is your logo on the edge and this on the edge? Like, so please avoid things like this. Make sure your logo is in a more comfortable place, right? Like typically I would suggest somewhere like here, right? But maybe here, okay? And then I can see the hierarchy of the text, but this is too far towards the edge of the artboard, right? This is not something I expect anyone to be doing at this point. Okay, so, and my suggestion also for this is, instead of having it like this, right? Your address is not taking 3 lines, 2 lines. It's easier for you to just extend this so you can take 1 line and be more concise. All right. Let me duplicate this and make the comments. Right. So bring this up. Okay. Stretch this out. So it's taking 3 lines and not more. Center align, center align, center align, and then you bring this towards the edge here. Right. So this is a very huge blunder. Right. Position it to the center and then bring your artwork to the center. Okay. Now you don't need this background because your text is very clear on your background already. Okay. What you want to do for this kind of thing is to just adjust it. Okay, so you put this thing on. So now there's a challenge here. You have this white underlay, and then you put a white overlay on top of the white overlay, and then a black overlay on top of the white overlay, right? The point of the overlays are so that when there's some form of illegibility, you can make your design stand out. So for this, right, my suggestion would be to expand this, right, and have more space for this text to show very clearly, okay? And because obviously it seems like everything is center aligned, right, which it is. For this, right, this might not be necessary because you already have an overlay under your text. All right. And my suggestion for this is also because the underlay is not making a lot of difference because it needs to be crisp enough to ensure that your text is showing clearly. Okay. So another thing that's also happening here is you can see the alignment is, you have the positional alignment, but you don't have the alignment of distance. So you can see the distance here, and then the distance up here is just much different. So you want to ensure that your, okay, let me do that here, right? For your shape, position this to middle aligned, right? So that they're right on the same edge. Okay. Now, for this, right, this is not clear because the alignment, the transparency is too much. Okay, it's actually easy for you to have your text like this, right? And then for this, new arrivals, right? Also, don't forget that you have text effects, right? I don't personally like to use a lot of text effects, but sometimes they're useful. Okay, so here's a good place to use your shadow because it's going to, or you can use your lift, right? So that it shows, it allows your text to show irrespective of the background. Okay, so what you want to do here is reduce the line spacing, right? And then increase it. So obviously this is the biggest information. So new arrivals, right? 20% discount, then shop now. Okay. Then you have this information here, right? What you want to do, if you're having your text here, right? My suggestion would be, if you're having all of this like this, right? It will be easier to just have your logo up top here, right? Because everything seems to be center aligned. Okay. and then reduce the new arrivals so it's not too big. So you have enough space, right? And then you can reduce the size of this as well. Okay. Now we have new arrivals here. All right. Okay. So bring this to down, right? And then, right, so this is much more well organized, right? Now, the only challenge that I'm having here is the fact that it feels like we're cramping too much information to make everything center aligned, right? So what we can do here is bring this down, right? And bring this to the right. Okay, except if you bring this to the right, now we have to right align it. All right, and this is on the left. Okay, or what we can even do to reduce that is to reduce the amount of space that this information is taking. Okay, so what that means is we would extend this. All right, so there are many things that you can do to ensure that you have all your information as concisely as possible. Okay, so now we can reduce this and then make new arrivals much bigger. Okay, and then so there we go, right? Nicely done. All right, now premium fabrics here isn't as clear as it should be, right? So what you can do for this kind of thing is you can actually create a shape below it. So what that means, you do something like this, just to ensure that your logo is very clear. Okay, take this down. I've taken it to lowest layer, right? I want to change this color to white. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is, now I want to introduce another. I don't want to put a circle because then it's going to be disturbing the logo itself, right? So what I want to do is I want to make a shape that doesn't feel like it's part of the logo. Okay, so you're going to see what I want to do. I want to make something that's going to make this look like a tag. All right, so I'm going to make this white as well. So now it feels like this is something from up. That's like you know how clothes have tags, right? Just to introduce the logo nicely without affecting the form of your shape or the design of your logo, right? Without trying to make it look like a different element entirely on your logo, right? So yeah, that feels like just some type of label that keeps your logo in place. Okay, so yeah, this has more, right? So this is definitely a no-no, definitely a no-no, right? These ones are even manageable, except of course, well, not that manageable, but because the contrast is really, the contrast is still not there, even though we introduced this. So it needs to be much stronger, right? And I mean, it doesn't have to be 100%, but if you want to maintain the opacity, then you want it to be clear enough, right? Something like this at least, right? So that it's still clear enough, although it still feels like it's distracting a bit. So that's why I just made it like this, all right? It's not impossible for it to have shapes on top of images, especially when the images are in background, all right? So I'll move on to the next one. Premium fabrics. Now, there's sort of a confusion here in the sense that we seem to be having premium fabrics, which is the name of the logo, here written as Premium Fabrics as opposed to the logo itself, right? So you, in no way should you try to replace your logo with a text that has the exact same description of what is written on your logo, right? That's just very confusing for your brand, right? So instead of doing this, bring your logo up here and keep your Premium Fabrics here, right? Okay, and then you have mega sale, and then you have these images. Now, the challenge with these images is it's not clear. You have a gradient, and then you have a very, very heavily distorted image. Well, not distorted, sorry, heavily colorful image, right? So also, if you look very closely, you can see that this thing is not very aligned. There's more space here than there is space here, and I wonder why. So obviously here, the gradient is from this to white, right? And then there's also some opacity, right? So now many things are actually going on here that makes it more complex, right? It needs to be much simpler. And we seem to be having a border, right? Nothing's wrong with a border actually, but let me just remove this, for example. But when you have elements in a design, right, that are, I'm trying to get to why I don't think it's perfect to have a border here, because I mean it's fine. So yeah, there's actually no, it's actually fine to have the border here. And I think I was just showing my personal bias. Okay, so now we have the exact same size. All right, I don't need that line to show there. Okay, so this is much clearer. Compare this to this. How easy is it to see the text on that compared to here? And another thing, your text, let's make them 3 lines instead of 4 lines, right? Bring this down here, right? Mega sale, enjoy up to, right? So you can see there's much more space here, right, than here, which means, so for your mega sale, you want to make your mega sale maybe white. So it's very, very, very clear, and maybe even bold. Okay. So enjoy up to 20% off on bulk orders, right? So this is fine, right? Premium fabrics, all properly aligned. Can you see the alignments now? Very, very, very sharp, right? And then your image can be here, right? And that's fine, all right? Personally, I'd probably have brought it into the middle. Why? So that I can have more space for mega sales, especially because the fabric is really colorful and it's still going to show either ways. Okay, so I'm just going to do something like this. Okay, as opposed to this, right? You can tell that this has a lot going on, but this seems to be passing the message across in a very, very much simpler and clearer way, right? And contrast, like if you look here, you can see the contrast is really poor because you have like light text on a gradient background that seems to be much more lighter than, or as light as the color of the text itself. Okay, so watch out for keeping your designs as simple as possible and ensuring that you have good contrast as well. All right. Premium fabrics, new arrivals, same problem that we've been having ever since, right? Having this text on the edge, right? Premium fabrics is very clear. I can see premium fabrics on this background, right? I can see that they are well aligned, but like I said earlier, to make this much easier for you, okay. So yeah, okay. So first of all, the problem that I have here is I don't even understand the arrangement. Why do we have the dates up on top, right? And then we have all the major information here, right? So first of all, you want to make this premium fabrics. Another thing, like I said, premium fabrics is the name of your brand already, so there's no need to repeat it here. Okay, so you have new arrivals. All right, now especially because you have this image as your background, it makes sense to have this to have this underlay that doesn't seem to have any opacity at all, because if you have any opacity, background color is still going to be very distracting, right? So, you know what, let me just duplicate this and make the comments here. All right, so number one, you delete this because it's completely unnecessary, right? Make this much bigger, right? And then for this, you just ungroup, and then so you have your text. You want to reduce the size of this so it's not too bulky. Okay. And you can even reduce the size here as well, right? And maybe bring them closer to each other. Okay, and here I don't seem to be seeing a uniformity in the fonts that I use. So for example, in the previous Premium Fabrics design, it was a different fonts that was used for new arrival. And here I'm seeing that it's also HK Grotesque, like a different sans font. Previously it was a serif font. Okay, so if this is your work, you can actually ask a question or say anything if you're not clear about anything, right? Here, gradient, obviously on the background is still going to be as distracting as it can be, right? So what you want to do, this is properly placed in terms of without having an extra line compared to the previous ones. So you drag this down, right? Reduce this thing, okay, just to make it as uniform as possible. Oh, sorry, I was adjusting the wrong one. Okay, remove the opacity completely so that your text is as clear as possible. Drag this down, right? Align this to the left. Okay. Now, my suggestion would be, if you're going to do this, right? Keep this as white so that it doesn't compete with new arrivals, because it seems to be like the only other thing that has the exact same color with new arrivals. So make this size of text, right? And I like there's already a hierarchy here in the sense that the font size of this should be smaller. So this is 25, this is 20. It doesn't seem to be enough, so let's increase this a bit, right? And then so that the contrast, so that the difference between the size of, and then you can actually even bring this closer, because I don't know why it seems too far away from the edge, right? Bring this closer, drag this down, and then you have this, right? Then you want to keep this aligned as well, and then bring this here, okay? Expand this a little just so it feels more uniform, right? Another thing that could have been easily done is to just centralize this, right? Position everything to the center, okay? And then put this in the middle, okay? Same thing here, put this in the middle, and then center align it, right? Your work is almost completely done already. So now you just need to reduce the size of this. And then here, okay, center align, okay, position to center. All right, and then you have this, okay? So you probably want to just bring this down here, all right? And then you have this too. And for this, you want to keep your logo up here. Now you can see that your logo is struggling to survive because of the multicolored nature of this design. Then here is a good place for you to actually add your overlay. Right? You can use the black overlay here so that your text is going to show. And then personally, it's not, I would not recommend having one single shape to just be an overlay for your logo, right? For me, it's nicer if you have the overlay for the whole design, right? Okay. Now that we've introduced an overlay, right, you realize that it might not even make sense to have this, because now your text is going to show very clearly, okay? Although we can still maintain it, all right? So now your logo is clearer.
Change is fine.
And then, yeah, so, yeah, right, much better, all right? First challenge that I'm seeing here is I can see 3 different fonts. This is Cormorants, this looks like
It's 22 hours.
this looks like Railway. Then this is another sans serif font, another sans serif font, right? This is not proper at all for a letterheaded paper. You want, and then here it seems to be all caps, and here no caps, right? So this is a lot of information. If you look through, and the reason why for things like letterheaded paper, it's actually easier for you to adapt an existing design, right? Look at the arrangement, the logo, the text, and then all you have all this information. It's literally almost the exact same thing. There's little innovation to be done. And if you notice, the size of this is usually much smaller, always in very, 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 well, not very small, but small enough size, right? That it doesn't distract. And many times they are properly spaced out. Okay, if you go all around, you find almost the exact same thing every single time, right? So that's something that I expect. All right. So number one, we have too many elements actually, right? There's this element, there's this element, and there's this element. Okay. What I want you to do is remove this. If possible, remove this. Keep your premium fabric, maybe just make it a little smaller, right? Keep it in the center. If you want to, this as the interesting elements. Many times on your letterheaded paper, you seem to just have only one interesting element, right? Just to make it simpler, because the letterheaded paper is not like for design, it's just to have a really nice arrangement of logo of elements that seem to be uniform and simple enough for to be represented as often as possible. Do you understand? So for here, obviously, I would suggest this needs to be heavily rearranged. All right. So let me just, without trying to do too much, come here and copy the style, right? So what do? I copy this. Okay, so this is the address. Okay. Personal line, this is left, right? Phone numbers. Email address. And then website. Okay, do you understand everything I've just said about this and the comments I'm making?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so align this to the left, right? You probably, for this, right, because we're Nigerians, we most likely don't have 2 numbers. If you have 2 numbers, you can keep the 2 numbers in a separate place. But if not, you might as well just have 2 lines, right? Separate this, okay? And then you have all this information here, okay? So you have 1 line for address, another line for this. Or you can actually just keep, personally, what I think I prefer the most is to keep all this on the same line, right? So delete this, right? Paste this. What's happening? Copy, paste. Okay. So what you would have, or what I would personally do is do something like this, where you have your phone number, 1, 2, 3, 4. You have some space, right? And then you have all this information here. Okay. All right. And then centralize everything. Okay, so I think this space is even too much. Okay. So that it's just easier to have all your information in the same place. All right, give it a little line spacing. And then there we go. Right, so we have all our details. Very nicely done. All right. Implement fabrics. We delete this. Like, this is so not what I expect. All right, different fonts, different, all caps, all small, right? So I expect something more uniform, right? And also another thing that I've always said, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like, there's so many letter paper samples. You just need to select one, adjust it to your design style, and move on from it. If you see the way I did the one that I did, well, for the other things that I did, like business card, right? It wasn't too much of a dramatic turnaround from what it was before, right? It just needs to be properly done to make your own design look nice. And even if you were going to do that, right? If you maintain the principles of design, you'll come up with something really clean. Okay. So first thing is that you see this is too close to the edge already, right? No, no, and no. All right. So either you reduce the size of this so that you can stay in the line, right? And then you bring this down. Okay. Content, who we are. Our brand narrative, to correct cheaper, nice. Brand book. Okay, so it has white, right? So you also, if you want to do this, right, then you also need to have you can introduce the different colors, having this in the primary color of the logo on this background, this primary color on the white background, and this white color on this primary background, which you already have here. So, right, so logo placement, dissecting the logo, do not use, do not rotate, do not mix the colors, very nice. Primary font is Cohort bold, right? And see everything I've always been saying, right? Everything I've always been saying. This thing is too close to the edge. So for this kind, especially when you're editing a template, right? You need to ensure that you are not missing out on some of the important things, right? This is too close to the edge. If you were going to do this, you would have to do something like this, primary font, right? Because you don't want it to be too close to the edge, okay? So don't miss this, right? And then see, there seems to be some lack of uniformity. Primary font, secondary font. Your presentation does not need to affect your presentation. So for your presentation, if this is the font you're using for your primary font, you need to maintain the exact same thing here for your secondary font. Okay, because your presentation, I'm also going to talk about designing presentations as well, right? Font variation. Okay. And then font hierarchy, right? So let me see, this is your body cup, your header, 42, 18, and then 18. So you see that's not proper. Your header is supposed to be a bigger size than your body copy, and your subheader, and your subheader is supposed to be bigger than your body copy. So here your body copy is 18 and your subheader is 18, which is not supposed to be. So your subheader should be a little bigger than this, like maybe 23, 24, or 25, right? And do you understand? I've explained this before. You're in the sizing, right? So we have the hex code, application, branding elements, using logo and colors, using it on websites, on an image. All right. So, well, this is nicely done, right? And then you see, now another thing, let me use this opportunity to start to explain how presentations work. When you're designing a presentation, right, some things need to be uniform. Uniformity. So look at this now. You can see that here it feels like, okay, let me explain it this way, right? So typically, I would suggest sticking to this line, right? Now, if you're sticking to this line here, you need to do the exact same thing everywhere else. So if you're doing this here, you will not do this, right? You would have to reduce the size of this. Now, another thing is, if you want to do this, right, you need to reduce the size of this, then you want to reduce the size on every other page. There needs to be a uniformity in your header, subheader, and body copy if you are working on a presentation. So here you cannot have a size 70 and then here have a different size 80. All right, so if you realize that there's a challenge, you want to adjust the size of everything to 70. All right, so that you have it uniform in terms of location, in terms of size, in terms of color. So now it's different here because you have a different size, so different color, but you want to maintain the same uniformity of size and location. All right. So you keep this on. Now, if you this is in a different, this is differently placed from this, if you notice. And here, right? You see that this here is literally like somewhere. If you see this space now, compared to what we have here. Right? Which is not proper. It's supposed, this, according to the way it was on that first page, this was like right in the middle. Okay, those tiny details are the things that make your presentation beautiful. Make your elements uniform. Let them be on the exact same place on every page. All right. And if you want to make that happen every single time, what you need to do is duplicate your page. Once you duplicate your page, you just change color. All right. Instead of having to manually adjust everything every single time. All right. Same thing is happening here. Right. And then you can see here you have digital in terms, you have capital D and then small f here. If you want to do sentence case, maintain sentence case for everything. Replace the location of this right in the middle, right? In the middle in terms in respect to this, all right? So that's something else that you need to watch out for, okay? Premium fabrics. Now, because of the elements of your design, right? I would personally be against having these lines because your design is floral, like your design, your logo is floral, the elements are circular, right? We now seem to be having a lot of straight elements. And also because this thing is touching your logo. Remember in your guideline, you are literally breaking your guideline rule, right? Typically in your guideline, you would have your safe space. Remember your safe space, right? And I don't even see that reflected here in your safe space, right? You didn't have the, maybe that's why you made this mistake, right? But you shouldn't have anything touching your logo, right? So apart from the fact that this is not supposed to touch your logo, so let's even assume that was separate. I would not, this element of a line introduced into this brand doesn't seem to blend properly, right? Because you have, I like the floral elements that you have here because they are synonymous with your brand, right? So you want to just maintain the style of elements, floral lines, circular, curved lines. So it would have been nicer if you had a curved element here instead of a straight line, all right? But definitely not touching your logo, okay? Okay, this is somebody's work. I don't want to go over this now because, okay, so this is a logo, Shop Slops Media, right? And we have this really nice, right? What's the second page for? So yeah, this is cool. This looks like a speaking type of thing, right? And I think you can change the color of this to suit your location. Really nice. So yeah, this is good. Okay, so I'm going to reload this page. This is somebody else's assignment, right? DK. Now, this is a very, very heavy script font, which David Carver, Mr. Dafoe is the font that was used here, right? But here it seems to be a different font entirely. Oh, this is the previous logo that this is the previous assignment, right? I see, right? First things first, everybody here should know this already, centralized, right? And then if you have an alternative for this, right, you want to have this in the center, okay, and this in the center as well, right? Then position everything to the center, and then you can centralize the whole thing, right? And then centralize it to the left and to the right. All right, same thing here. Center, center, okay? This is literally just like not the assignment basically, because it wasn't done on Canva, it was just imported as an image, right? This is also literally an element, which is an icon, which is very, 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 very direct, but for the sake of the assignment here, I think that works, okay? And then David Kagba, this is also fine. But this, I have a problem with this because of the heaviness and the complexity of the script font. So because it's a heavy script font, it's difficult for you to work with another script font that is in caps. All right. So either if you're this is not a very good combination in terms of the two text. So fonts like this need to be alone. If it's just the D, you have the D, and then you have small. But when you have two heavily ornamented script fonts, it's very difficult for it to be seen as what is supposed to be. So now it looks like NK, it looks like DK, it kind of also looks like W upside down, right? So you don't want to miss that out. The way this will work is if you had like all that small text around it. So if you had this D and then you had AVID, people know it's D. I will never confuse it for any other thing. But because there are two different types of they're just two individual letters that don't have any registration points in our minds, it might be difficult to explain what they are. Okay, so I'm just going to move on. All right, so let's just move on to, okay, let me stop sharing now. This is 1016, and we're supposed to work on presentation, right? So I'm just going to go over to Canva, quickly do something on how to work on presentations, right? Really quickly. Now, it's going to be easy because you've spent all that time working on the principles of design and, you know, all of that, right? So I'm just going to go to File right now and create new design, okay? Presentation. Obviously, you're going to see a lot of templates, and all these templates, in almost in every case, they always apply the principles of design, right? So let me apply all pages, for example, for this design, right? Now, remember many of the things that I mentioned. These things are going to be on the exact same place in every page, right? You will not see this shifted to the left here and this one will be down here. Never, never, ever do anything like that, okay? It's going to be very bad for the uniformity of your design. Now, this is a very simple, is a clean and classy design, right? That seems to be very, very well done, right? But let me start afresh just for the purpose of explaining how presentations work, okay? Presentations many times, so I'm just going to start with a new presentation. Okay. Right. Now, looking at how presentations are done, you're basically applying the principles of design. And many times, some of the most popular styles of presentation are division related. So for example, you would have situations where you have your title, right? Which is obviously going to be the biggest thing. Think of this like a social media design. What's the title of this presentation? How to design a presentation, right? Presentation, right? Now, this is the title of the presentation. Obviously, it's going to be the most important thing, okay? And then, now, for a cover page, right, you probably want to, now this would be nice, except, of course, I have a center-aligned box that's in the center, but doesn't, a left-aligned box that doesn't seem to be center-aligned. But a left-aligned box that is center-aligned on the page, right? So you want your alignment to be uniform. left aligned on the left, center aligned in the center, right aligned on the right. Okay. How to design a presentation, right? Now, for things like this, what you want to do is you want to start to introduce your elements. Okay. Another thing, like I said, you want to add a subheading. Without, let's assume this is what I want to add, without doing too much. Okay. Now, because everything is center aligned, then I'm going to write my name somewhere under, or a detail about who is making the presentation, right? David Rotimi, 2021. Okay, so this is my body copy. Obviously, you can tell by the size, right? This is center aligned. Now you want to start to introduce your elements, all right? If I want to use a background here, I need to ensure that I'm using the exact same type of background on every page, right? So imagine that this is background that I'm using. Yeah, this is possible that I can use this background. Imagine I want to use this gradient, right? This also works. Now you can also start to introduce other elements that are going to be consistent. For example, if I want to introduce a swirl, right? Depending on what my style is, right? So in this context, you don't have a style that we're referring to, all right? So we're free to play around and figure out what will work. Okay, so I'm going to use only 3 elements right now. Yeah. So let's say I introduce this. Okay. I want to give this a nice color that will contrast, right? So this can work, or I can just change it to white. It's also going to work. Now I can duplicate this just so I have some, interesting uniformity as well. And I don't have to do the exact same direct opposite. I can move this around and keep this here. Okay. Now our presentation is coming alive. Yeah. You see how the simple introduction of that element just made my design completely different entirely. Now with presentations, you don't want to do too much. You definitely don't want to do too much. Okay. So now I'm going to start to create my pages. All right. So introduction. Okay. Because every page is going to have a header, I want to find a nice place where I'm going to put all my headers and make sure that I'm going to maintain the exact same position every single time. All right. That's 1. 2 is I want to introduce maybe a line element just to make my design look simple. If I bring it to the right here, right, that's going to work. If I bring it to the right here, that's also going to work. If I keep it in the center and maintain this, you can see what's happening. I'm keeping the line within the edge, and it's also obviously very centralized. All right, now that's 1. Right, introduction. Many times in presentations, you want to ensure that you don't have too much text. All right, you don't want to have too much text. So when you have your text, lorem ipsum. Now you can see how it's working. It's spreading around. If you're creating a template, you want to ensure that you create your template with the alignment that you want. All right, so now that I've changed everything to the left alignment, I want to ensure that as I'm pasting and pasting and pasting, everything is changing, is aligning to the left. Okay. All right. So obviously this is too small in terms of size. So I'm just going to increase this because for a presentation, the goal is completely different. You are not trying to say too much. You want to say as much as possible in the fewest words possible. If you noticed every presentation I've done, you hardly find too many texts on the pages. All right. That's because in a presentation, you are literally carrying people along. You don't want them to spend all the time reading your slide. All right. So for this purpose, I'm going to introduce my element here again. Right. Maybe I'll keep it on the left this time and just rotate it nicely. Okay. And then for presentations, a really huge part of presentations are your images. All right. So you want to introduce an image. Let's say I want to introduce this image. Okay. Depending on what you want to do. Typically, I like to use half of the page for my images, right? And there you go. You can decide to keep this on top of your image. You can decide to keep it under your image, whichever one works as well, right? And then when you duplicate this, you might want to switch the orientation a bit in the sense that you want to bring this to the right to make it more interesting. Once you bring this to the right, what do? You align it to the right. All right, so that when you are introducing more text, it's just starting from that side. Do you understand? Here, if you look at what's happening here, because the center align, once I'm adding text, is increasing like this, right? But if I left align it, when I'm adding text, it's just fluid. Nice, you understand? So, and then when you bring this to the right, align, bring this to the front, take this to the left, obviously, take this to the back, and then bring this to the right. Okay, then you can rotate it again just because you want to make it a little interesting as well, right? And then here you have your second page. All right, so you can just change the image that you have here. All right, so there are many ways you can actually go around with your presentation, but basically you want to ensure that you have your elements in uniform, all right, so that there's no you have no issues with any of the things that you're doing. All right, I'm going to stop here today, and we're going to have another class next week. And that's because I want everyone to finish up the assignments. Many people haven't finished up the assignments. You might wonder why this class is actually filled with assignments. It's because I'm telling you for a fact, I've taught many people design before. Everything that I'm teaching is on YouTube, right? So if you really just wanted to know the information, you go on YouTube, watch it, and nothing's going to happen. But you want to be guided. You want to do an assignment, and you want to learn and do it. Do you get? And then you also want to be guided. So that's the point of this. The point of the assignment is for you to watch, learn, apply, make corrections, and go over that cycle as often as possible. The more you go through that journey, the better you become. All right, and that's the simple reason why you're giving so many assignments. So I need you to pay attention to the assignments. Please make sure that they are available. I'm going to make another class for Friday next week. I'll start the June cohorts. So let's do you know what? I'll communicate on the group and figure out what time will be the best. All right.